So ideally, before we get into how to punch, how to elbow, I used to deal with this a lot when I would teach CQB to new students. And there'd be a doorway that they were supposed to make entry through, and they would do all sorts of craziness. So they're supposed to be going into a room or a house, and they're all in their stack. You've seen it in a billion Hollywood Navy SEAL movies. And they're supposed to go through the door and make entry into the room. And the second you tell somebody that they're about to do something tactically, they take something they've been doing their entire lives and make it complicated. So ideally, you'd see all sorts of craziness. You'd see them actually get their motor going before they start to move. They do like the stutter step. They'd hit the doorway and cross their legs. They'd get super low and do like this duck walkie thingy, and just craziness. So I'd always pull them aside. I ask them their age, and they'd say 18, 19, whatever. And I'd be like, okay, so for 18, 19 years, you've been walking and just now decided to start screwing it up. This movement, when I am going to walk into a room, albeit I have a forward-leaning posture, right? I have that forward-leaning posture. I have my modified isosceles for movement, and I'm going to walk in that modified isosceles. When I start to walk, it's this crazy concept that it's just walking, right? So don't overthink it. Don't overdo it. Punching is the same concept. Kicking is the same concept. When I tell you that I'm about to teach you a kick, your brain automatically goes into you're doing this super complicated advanced technique you've never done before, and you're probably not going to be very good. So you overthink it, when in reality, kicking is I bring up my leg, I put the ball of my foot on an object, and follow through on it. The easier concept, punching, all my life I've been reaching out for doorknobs to pick up a jar of peanut butter to make a sandwich, throwing a baseball, right? Whatever. There's all these things, open a car door, that I've been doing with my hands. And when I'm about to do those things, I don't think about get ready, grab it, right? So it should be no different for a punch. But since we don't throw punches all the time, and we have to learn how to throw a punch, our brain creates this whole other process to compensate for our lack of knowledge, which is where telegraphing comes from. So I'll rear my shoulder back and do like this 1, 2, 3 process to just do this, right? And that was on my heels, straight up and down, right? There was all of a sudden, that was like, you know, a retaliatory sucker punch is what that might be, with no sound structure. And as you can see, I hit the bag, I hurt the bag, but I also sent myself backwards. So it lends itself to that other lesson, right? But ideally, like, all we're doing with a punch is the same thing we do when we go to touch something. If I wanted to shove somebody, like, right? There's not like a big rock back and a right? Because if I do that, they're going to move out of the way because they're going to see it coming. Someone who knows how to shove somebody, it's the same concept. Forward-leaning posture, right? If I shoot that forward-leaning posture and drive my hands out in front of me as fast as possible, right? So it's the same concept with punching. I got my hands up, eye level, right? If they're too low, I'm going to have to come up, get on line, and then punch, which is another reason to keep your hands up at eye level. And I'm just going to reach out. Boom. That's your punch right there. Just straight out. Then, like we talked about earlier, from this side, right? Straight out. That's your punch. That's all your arm has to do. The second that I throw the hip and the foot rotation in there with my shoulder drill that I did earlier, the power gets behind it. So I started doing with a lot of my students, after I teach them the body strike and the footwork to improve their structural integrity, as they make impact and make strikes to get their body behind it, I then graduate them before striking to the touch drill. So when they were doing this, all right, then you put your hands out in front of you, so you just touch the bag. And you can even see too, light touches on this bag, the bag's moving. And all I'm doing is touch, 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 touch with a little bit of hip and foot rotation, and I'm slowly able to progress this aqua bag on a pendulum out of its space, right? And that's where true power is generated, okay? So touch, 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 touch. With kicking, it's essentially the same thing. Very lackadaisical, very relaxed, okay? I'm not gonna 1-2 it. There's this video where a guy kind of analyzes Joe Rogan and the way he teaches a side kick, and he teaches it in the 1-2 fashion. But then when you see Rogan throw it, right, it's just a very straight on. The only reason that knee is flexing it at all is because close enough to, you have to kind of collapse it down a bit to get on line and up and level and then follow through, right? So when it comes to kicking, you may teach it in a 1-2 manner, okay? But as time goes on, you want that leg to not really 1-2, other than to be able to bring that kick online if you need it, right? You really want that kick to come out straight as possible, right? Roundhouse, 1-2, and you really want, boom, 1. Okay, so one fluid movement, one full straight line. So we teach it in a 1-2 fashion. Ideally, you want to take the 2-step out of it and make it one lightning fast kick as one solid movement. So how do I kind of reprogram the student's brain on kicks as we go along? Well, it's the same thing as the touch drill, right? I'm making sure, and even for the legs, you can kind of warm them up with the shoulder, right? Forward leaning, shoulder, because it's the same concept. I got to bring my hip around. So I'm just going to lackadaisically get the ball of that foot, forward leaning with my shoulders, and just kind of push on that bag. If the bag starts rocking me back, I'm probably not slightly forward leaned, and it might be pushing me back to my heels. I'm in a good position, so it's not doing it right now. So if I go here, right, if I'm on my heels, if I'm straight up and down, with that forward leaning posture though, I just kind of, boom, touch and stop, as if I'm using my hands to like touch a doorknob, not kick, right? And I'm just getting my foot into contact with it. It's going to get me comfortable with the idea that kicking is not really any different than walking. You're just lifting your legs higher, right? We don't walk like this. That's crazy. So we don't kick like this, right? This isn't a movie about Sparta, right? Over time, that kick will turn into something powerful, because as we push and lean into the balls of our feet, and we got our weight distributed in the balls of our feet forward leaning, we come up on that heel a little bit, just a little bit, so that we can rotate and we get casual with it, just pushing that bag around with the feet. Now, start to get a little glute jaw in there, right? And kicking becomes a kind of a casual thing. So we teach it like this, 1-2, maybe. We teach it like this, 1-2, right? Maybe. But it needs to graduate with that touch drill, right? And that's how we generate that power. Forward leaning, learning to touch with it, learning the 1-2, but learning to just casually touch with it and not think of it as some grandiose movement. I'm really just taking this surface area and just putting my foot on that target, but I'm going to do it with forward leaning, forward momentum, and I'm going to do it with speed. I'm not going to rear up my muscles and, right? No, that's crazy, right? I'm going to do it with speed. Kind of superficial on the bag, and that'll misguide students to think that was a crappy kick. On someone's kneecap, at the right proximity, that is enough power to go through that kneecap. And that is what we are trying to get after. Remember, bags are just training tools. Pads are just training tools. You cannot get a thud on a focus mitt, but still have thrown a good punch. Because sometimes people don't even know how to use focus mitts. They just kind of sit there and they don't meet the impact of the punch, which can ultimately lead to injury like tennis elbow and stuff, right? And it gives false feedback that they're throwing a crappy punch when the reality is that they're doing this, but they're not getting thud, thud, thud on the focus mitt. Still a good punch, right? So remember, these are just training tools, okay? And the idea being that when I'm kicking, touch, 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 nice and casual. Learn to, as I do this touch, touch with the foot, and I find that ball, that foot on that bag, to be light on my rear foot, on my base leg, right? Or if I'm throwing a rear kick, straight kick, that I'm light on my lead foot, right? So that when I touch this bag and I step through that bag, that my heel comes along and my hips are able to open. What this will also help students identify is, when I throw that kick, am I leaving this leg behind? Is my trail leg coming with me? Am I light enough that when I throw that, I can slide or kind of skip? Sometimes it's one or the other, right? Especially like static movements. You notice that, like, there's a lot of dirt right now that I've chewed up because my feet are not glued to the floor. And this is a more light way to kind of get them rotating that heel. Nice and casual. Then we get the hands up, right? And we start to get harder and heavier with it and challenge our core and our center of gravity and our posture more intensely. But you start off with those easy concepts, easy movements before we start talking about how to punch, right? Touch, touch. Instead of throwing punches, I could teach them an open palm strike off that touch, touch drill, and we're already starting to graduating to punch correctly. Then we just need to teach them about, you know, the push up on the knuckles, the 2 fingers into the ground is how I want to make impact type of stuff.